They mocked the homeless black man who entered the hotel, claiming it was his. What happened next shocked everyone. Rain hit the city like it was trying to wash something away. The streets were nearly empty, except for one man. He walked slowly, drenched from head to toe, water dripping off his old coat. His boots were torn, the soles nearly coming off. Over one shoulder, he carried a burlap sack, worn out, stained by time, but gripped like it held gold. He didn't walk like a beggar. He didn't ask for anything. He just moved with quiet confidence, like a man heading home after a long journey. Then, the hotel doors opened. Inside, warmth, soft music, crystal chandeliers. A golden glow surrounded everything. Guests in shiny dresses and sharp suits laughed, with drinks in hand. The floors shined like mirrors. It was the kind of place where money didn't just speak, it bragged. And then, silence. The man stepped in. Wet footprints followed him across the marble floor. His hair stuck to his forehead, water dripping from his chin, heads turned. Conversation stopped. A few gasped. Some wrinkled their noses. One woman whispered, "Oh my God, what is he doing here?" The security guard by the door stood up straight, eyes narrowed, hand moving toward his earpiece. Guests stepped aside, as if the man carried a disease. Still, he said nothing. He looked around slowly, not with confusion, but with memory, like someone who had been here before. Behind the front desk, a young woman called out carefully, "Excuse me, sir? You can't be in here." He didn't look at her. He kept walking. Moments later, the hotel manager stormed out from his office. Middle-aged, slick hair, expensive suit, voice sharp. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Immediately." Finally, the man stopped. He turned to face the manager, and then, with a calm voice and eyes that didn't blink, he said, "This hotel belongs to me." The room went still for half a second. Then laughter. One man near the bar laughed so hard he spilled champagne on his shirt. Another whispered to his friend, "That's a new one. Most just ask for change." The manager chuckled too. "Oh, really? That's bold. What makes you think this is yours, huh?" The man didn't flinch. He didn't even smile. Just looked at him. Quiet, certain. "My name is Elijah, and this place was mine. Long before your name ever meant anything." The laughter stopped. The manager's smile faded slightly. "Okay. Security. Escort him out now." Two large guards came up quickly. One grabbed Elijah's arm, not roughly, but firmly. But Elijah didn't fight. He just reached into his sack slowly. The guard stiffened, maybe thinking he had a weapon. But all he pulled out was a folded piece of old yellow paper. Water had seeped through the edges, but the ink still held. "Before you throw me out," Elijah said quietly, "read this." The manager snatched the paper and glanced at it. He laughed again, but this time there was a flicker of something else. Unease. He waved the paper in the air like it was a joke. "An old deed? This proves nothing." "Check your records," Elijah said. "Look up who helped fund this hotel before your father took full control. I didn't come here for pity. I came to take back what was stolen." The guards didn't know what to do. They looked to the manager for instruction. He snapped, "Throw him out," and they did. They dragged Elijah across the lobby and shoved him into the rain. His sack hit the ground. His knees scraped against the wet concrete. But still, he didn't look defeated. He stood up slowly, picked up his sack, and looked up at the glowing hotel sign above the entrance. Water poured down his face, but his eyes were steady. He looked right at the manager, who now stood at the doorway. "You laughed," Elijah said, his voice cutting through the storm. "But you won't be laughing for long." The manager rolled his eyes and slammed the door shut. Inside, everything returned to normal. Laughter, music, and soft piano melodies. But outside, in the cold rain, a man named Elijah Carter stood, alone but not broken, because after 30 years on the streets, 15 years in prison, and a lifetime of silence, he had returned, and he wasn't, leaving without the truth. The rain didn't stop. Elijah stood across the street from the Silvercrest Hotel, his soaked clothes clinging to him, his breath visible in the cold air. He didn't look back at the crowd inside. He didn't shake his head or curse under his breath. He simply stood there, watching, waiting. He had seen it all before, in his mind. Hundreds of times. He used to dream about this place. Not the building, not the name carved in gold, but what it stood for: opportunity, ownership, legacy. Now, all it stood for was what was taken from him. Inside the hotel, behind the marble counter, Amanda, the receptionist, stood frozen. Her hands were still resting on the desk where the yellow paper had been dropped. Her coworkers had already gone back to chatting and scrolling their phones, brushing off what just happened. But Amanda couldn't stop thinking about that man's eyes. He wasn't crazy. He wasn't lost. He knew exactly what he was doing. And that paper, the way he held it, it looked like something he'd been carrying for years, like it had been through fire, wind, and time. And somehow, it still survived, just like him. That night, while the rest of the staff clocked out and the guests returned to their suites, Amanda stayed behind. She told her manager she was just reorganizing desk files. What she was really doing was searching. The name, Elijah Carter, kept repeating in her head. She opened the staff-only archives, the place where they kept old records and documents that hadn't been uploaded to the new digital system yet. Dust covered the folders. Most hadn't been touched in years. She started pulling files, invoices, construction permits, financial ledgers from the 80s. Then something strange, a folder labeled Founders 1975. Her hand stopped. She opened it slowly. Inside was a newspaper clipping from years ago. Faded, brittle, but the headline still stood out. Black entrepreneur partners with Bennett Kavanaugh on major hotel project. Amanda blinked. There was a photo. 2 men shaking hands in front of an empty construction lot. One of them was unmistakable. Elijah, much younger, wearing a sharp suit full of confidence. This wasn't a man off the street. This wasn't some delusional stranger. He was part of this hotel's foundation. Literally. She looked again at the article. It mentioned how the 2 men were business partners, how they pooled their resources to develop a new high-end hotel in the city, a place that would symbolize growth, equality, and modern opportunity. But then she flipped the page, and something odd happened. There were no more mentions of Elijah Carter. None. Not in the next article, not in the following year. It was as if, after that handshake photo, he vanished. Amanda's stomach sank. She searched more files, desperate now. She found tax records. By the mid-'80s, the Kavanaugh name was the only one listed. Elijah's name was erased from everything. Gone. Why? Was he bought out? Did he walk away? Or was he pushed out? As Amanda packed up to leave, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something. Or worse, that someone wanted her to miss something. She took photos of the old documents on her phone, then slipped the folder back carefully. The rain had stopped outside, but the air was still heavy. As she left the building, she looked down the street, half expecting to see Elijah standing there. But he was gone. Across the city, in a small alley between 2 buildings, Elijah sat under a broken awning, his sack beside him. The sound of distant cars filled the night, but in his mind, he was far away. Back to 1975. Back to when he and Bennett Kavanaugh were still equals, when they dreamed together, built together, before the silence, before the betrayal. Elijah reached into his sack, pulled out the same worn document, and unfolded it carefully. His name, Elijah Carter, was still there, just above the faded ink that read, co-owner of parcel lot 47A, Silvercrest Development. He stared at it like it was a memory made real. His fingers traced the edges. He remembered the day he signed it, the smell of the ink, the sweat in his palms, the pride in his heart, and then the day they came for him. 2 officers. No warning, no chance to explain. One morning, they knocked. The next, he was in a cell. Fabricated charges. Embezzlement, they said. False financial records. A business partner who had suddenly vanished from public view. By the time Elijah got out, the world had moved on. His name meant nothing. The hotel had opened, prosperous, glittering, and entirely claimed by one family. He spent years trying to fight it. But doors slammed shut before he could even knock. His lawyers disappeared. His letters were never answered. Friends turned to strangers. Eventually, all he had left was the paper. And the truth. Now, after all those years, he was back. And this time, he wasn't leaving without answers or justice. The city was quiet the next morning, but Amanda's thoughts were not. She hadn't slept. All night, her mind had been replaying Elijah's face, his calm voice, that faded photo from the 70s, the way his name vanished from the hotel's records without a trace. She knew something was wrong, deeply wrong. By sunrise, she was back at the hotel, not in uniform, not at the front desk, but in the old records room in the basement, where the air was heavy with dust and forgotten secrets. She dug deeper. Old ledgers, archived legal notices, building permits. She scanned documents from 1985, 1986, and then 1987. That's when everything changed. In a locked drawer marked Confidential Legal Affairs, she found what looked like internal memos. Her heart beat faster. A note written by the hotel's former legal advisor read, "Transfer complete. Carter's name removed from deed records. No press coverage allowed." There it was, cold and clear. Elijah's name wasn't erased by accident. Someone had done it on purpose. She took a photo of the document. Hands trembling, she backed out of the room, double-checking the hallway before heading upstairs. Later that evening, Amanda texted Diego. He was part of the maintenance staff. Quiet, kind, and the only other person who had looked concerned when Elijah was thrown out. "Can you meet me tonight? I found something," Diego replied instantly. "I was going to message you. I saw something too. Security footage. There's more going on than we thought." They met at a small diner near the edge of town. Amanda brought her phone. Diego brought something heavier, a printout of the hotel's entry logs from the past week. "The night before Elijah showed up," he said, "someone accessed the secure archive room for over an hour. Guess who?" Amanda stared. It was Langley, the manager. He'd seen Elijah's name pop up. Maybe heard rumors of someone snooping in old files. And he'd gone straight to cover his tracks. But that wasn't all. Diego had also saved a blurry screenshot from a lobby camera. Elijah handing over the old deed, Langley tossing it aside. Then, a moment most guests missed. Diego quickly snapping a photo of the document before it vanished. "I've got the image," he said quietly. "And it's real. His name, the lot number, everything." Amanda felt her heart catch. "This isn't just some old story," she said. "This is a crime. An entire man's life was stolen. And now, someone's trying to bury it again." They agreed. Elijah needed to know. They'd find him and tell him what they had. They'd help him fight. But they never got the chance that night. On his way home, Diego noticed a black SUV parked outside his building. Tinted windows, engine running. The same SUV he'd seen outside the hotel on days when nothing was wrong. but everything felt off. He walked past it, pretending not to notice. Inside, his apartment looked the same, but something was wrong. The window lock had been twisted. A drawer was open that he hadn't touched. Diego didn't sleep that night. He stayed up, watching the door, his phone charged and ready. The next morning, he didn't show up at work. Amanda called. No answer. She texted. Nothing. She knew something had gone terribly wrong. By lunchtime, she got a message from an unknown number. No words, just a photo. A blurry shot of Diego, his face partially turned, seated beside a table with a bright light hanging overhead. A warehouse? A garage? She couldn't tell. But it was him. And then a single text. Stop digging, or this ends badly for both of you. Amanda stared at the screen for a long time. Then she turned it off and stood up. Something inside her shifted. Fear was there, sure, but so was something stronger. Anger. They could erase files. They could threaten her. They could even make Diego disappear. But what they couldn't erase was the truth. Not this time. She grabbed her coat and left the hotel, ignoring Langley's sharp voice calling after her. There was only one place she needed to be now, and she hoped Elijah was still alive to hear what she had to say. Amanda found Elijah behind an old church on the east side of town. The building was worn, but warm. It offered meals a few nights a week and a place to rest when the shelters were full. One of the volunteers had seen Elijah earlier that morning, sitting on the back steps with his sack beside him, staring out into the empty lot next door. He didn't talk much, just sat quietly, like he was waiting for something, and maybe he was. Amanda arrived just as the sun was beginning to set. The sky was painted orange, but the air had turned cold again. She spotted Elijah sitting on a wooden bench that looked like it had survived one too many winters. His clothes were still damp. His hands wrapped around that same old burlap sack like always. "Elijah?" she said gently. He turned his head slightly, recognizing her, but said nothing. Just watched. "I work at the Silver Crest," she added. "I was there the day you walked in." Elijah looked away, as if that day was already a lifetime ago. "I believe you," Amanda said, stepping closer. "And I found something you should see." At that, Elijah blinked, slowly. Then he turned back toward her, eyes sharp but tired. "They always believe too late," he said. "Maybe," she answered, "but not this time." She sat next to him and pulled out her phone. Her fingers shook a little as she opened the photos of the deed, of the newspaper article, and most of all, the note she'd found in the old file, the one confirming someone had removed Elijah's name from the hotel's history on purpose. She handed him the phone. Elijah took it carefully, as if it might break in his hands. As the images loaded, his breathing changed, not faster, just deeper. His jaw tightened. He didn't speak for a long time. Amanda waited, unsure whether to say more. But eventually, he looked at her, not with suspicion, but with something else. Maybe trust, maybe grief, maybe both. "They stole everything," Elijah said quietly. "And they made the world forget I ever existed." Amanda nodded. "Not anymore. We have proof now. Me and Diego, one of the night staff, we've been digging. He has footage, documents, everything." "Diego," Elijah repeated the name. "Where is he?" Amanda hesitated. That pause said everything. "He didn't show up to work this morning," she said, voice low. "Last night he texted me, said he had found something, and then nothing. Just a message from an unknown number, a photo of him, and a warning." Elijah stared straight ahead. "That's how they work. Quiet threats, silent hands. They make you disappear without leaving a noise." "You think it's Kavanaugh?" Amanda asked. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Bennett Kavanaugh may have been the one who betrayed Elijah decades ago, but his son, Jonathan, now ran the Silver Crest. And from what Amanda had seen, He'd learned his father's tricks and sharpened them. "They've been watching me," Elijah said, "following me for weeks now, ever since I walked in that hotel." "Why didn't you go to the police?" Amanda asked. Elijah gave her a sad smile. "They stopped listening a long time ago. When I had a home, a family, a suit and tie, they listened. But now?" He looked down at his sack. "I'm just a ghost to them." Amanda swallowed hard. It was true. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, heard his story, she might have thought the same. "But we're not alone anymore," she said. "I shared the photos with a journalist, one who's been after the Kavanaugh family for years. He wants to meet you." Elijah looked at her, eyes narrow. "You trust him?" "I don't know yet," Amanda admitted. "But we have to try. We can't fight this from the shadows." Elijah didn't answer right away, but after a moment he nodded. "Then we do it right. We don't just accuse them, we show the truth." From inside his sack, Elijah pulled out a small black notebook. The cover was frayed, the pages yellowed at the corners. "What's that?" Amanda asked. "Memories," Elijah said. "I've been watching, for years. Sitting outside that hotel, listening, seeing who comes and goes, who gets paid under the table, who changes records late at night." He handed the notebook to Amanda. She opened it carefully. Page after page, written in tight, neat handwriting. Names, dates, receipts, even drawings of the hotel floor plan. Meetings that weren't supposed to happen. Deliveries made through back doors. Money that didn't go where it should. This is huge," Amanda whispered. "It's not enough," Elijah said. "Not without the ledger." "What ledger?" "The one Bennett kept," he said. "Back when we were still partners, he kept a book. He recorded everything, every bribe, every payment, every false signature. It was his way of controlling people. And Jonathan has it now. Somewhere in that hotel." Amanda felt a chill. They had only scratched the surface. The real proof, the one that could break the Kavanaugh family for good, was still hidden. And getting it would mean stepping back into the place that kicked him out. The Silver Crest. But this time, Elijah wouldn't be standing at the door. He'd be going all the way to the top. The next night, the Silver Crest glowed brighter than ever. It was the hotel's annual gala, an event dripping with money, music, and carefully curated smiles. City officials, business elites, media figures, all gathered under one roof to sip champagne and celebrate the legacy of the Kavanaugh name, the same name that had buried Elijah Carter's truth for over 3 decades. But tonight, the past was coming back through the front door, not with fists, not with noise, but with quiet steps, steady hands, and one final shot at the truth. Amanda and Elijah sat in a parked car 2 blocks away. Amanda wore a black cocktail dress borrowed from Martha Reynolds, a former secretary of Elijah's from back in the 70s, now retired, but still sharp and loyal. She'd made a few calls, pulled a few strings, and managed to secure Amanda an invite to the gala as a consultant guest. Elijah sat beside her, clean-shaven, hair combed, dressed in a crisp tuxedo that looked like it had waited years to be worn. He looked nothing like the man who had been thrown out into the rain just days ago. "You sure you're ready for this?" Amanda asked. Elijah didn't answer right away. He stared out the window at the hotel like it was a mountain he was finally ready to climb. "I've waited half my life for this night," he said quietly. "If there's any justice left in this world, it starts now." Diego, recovered, but still limping from whatever had been done to him, sat in the back seat. He was nervous, watching the rearview mirror every few seconds. "We only have one shot," he said. "Once we're in, everything has to move fast. No hesitation." Amanda nodded. "We get the ledger. We get out. We take it straight to the press. Or the FBI," Elijah added. "Whichever gets there first." With Martha's credentials, Amanda entered through the front. Diego and Elijah, dressed as hotel staff, slipped in through the service entrance using stolen keycards and uniforms provided by Carl, the janitor who still remembered Elijah as the man who once owned half the hotel. Inside, the ballroom sparkled. Waiters carried trays of tiny food, string instruments played soft classical music, and the Kavanaugh name was whispered like royalty. Amanda moved through the crowd with practiced ease, offering polite smiles and nods. She wasn't here to mingle. She was here to distract, observe, and wait for the right moment. Meanwhile, Elijah and Diego navigated the back corridors, dusty hallways most guests never saw. They passed through kitchens, linen closets, narrow staircases. Every corner held a memory for Elijah, a scar. At the top floor, they reached the hallway leading to Jonathan Kavanaugh's private office. No one was around. Most of the hotel's senior staff were downstairs, keeping the gala running smoothly. Elijah paused outside the office door. "This used to be mine," he said, voice low. Before they changed the locks, the nameplate, and the story. Diego handed him a small device, a keypad cracker. "It'll work. Just give it time." Elijah connected the device to the electronic lock and waited. The light blinked yellow, then green. The door clicked. Inside, the office smelled like expensive leather and polished wood. The walls were lined with books no one had ever read. A giant painting of Bennett Kavanaugh hung over the desk, smiling like he'd won something that never belonged to him. "We have to be fast," Diego reminded him. They searched the room quickly, drawers, cabinets, behind paintings, beneath, floorboards. Nothing. Then Elijah froze. He turned toward the painting of Bennett again. Without a word, he reached up and lifted it off the wall. Behind it, a safe. "I knew he wouldn't trust the cloud," Elijah said. "He always wanted his secrets close." Diego stepped forward. "Code?" Elijah thought for a moment, then whispered, 1915. The year Bennett's father was born. The keypad beeped once, then again. Then the safe opened with a soft metallic sigh. Inside was a thick, leather-bound book, worn but intact. A ledger. Its pages yellowed, its corners cracked. But it was real. They flipped through it. Handwritten. Notes in Bennett's handwriting. Entries like, "Paid to Officer J.W. for arrest setup. Carter embezzlement cover. Transferred property records. Remove Carter's name from title. Silver crest now listed under Kavanaugh Holdings only. Finalized." Page after page. A map of the betrayal. Elijah didn't say a word. His hands held the book like it was both treasure and poison. Then, footsteps. Heavy, fast, coming up the hallway. "Elijah," Diego said, eyes wide. "We need to go." Elijah slipped the ledger into his jacket. They moved fast, back through the door, down the hall. But as they turned the corner, Langley appeared. He spotted them instantly. "What the hell?" Before he could finish, Diego slammed the side of the door into his arm and dragged him inside a storage room. Langley shouted once before Diego shoved a rag into his mouth. "Sorry," Diego muttered. "Not tonight." Elijah took one last look at the man who had laughed in his face and whispered, "I warned you." They slipped out the emergency exit. Meanwhile, downstairs, Amanda had just received a text from Elijah. "We have it. Meet at the loading dock in 5. But she wasn't the only one who saw them leave. At the back of the ballroom, a man in a black suit pressed a finger to his earpiece and said 2 quiet words, "They have it." The back alley behind the Silver Crest was wet from earlier rain. Dim yellow lights flickered overhead. Steam curled from a nearby vent, rising into the cold night air. Amanda paced near the loading dock, her heels now muddy, her breath sharp from the cold. Her phone buzzed. Elijah's message again. "We have it. Meet at the loading dock in 5. She glanced back at the hotel's glowing ballroom windows, where laughter still echoed and people toasted champagne to a legacy built on lies. Tonight, that legacy was about to crumble. A side door creaked open behind her. She spun, tense, until she saw them, Elijah and Diego, breathless, flushed, and carrying something wrapped in Elijah's jacket. Amanda exhaled with relief. "You got it?" Elijah nodded. "It's all in here. Names, dates, signatures, everything for—" She could respond. Diego held up a hand. "We're not alone." Behind them, headlights turned the alley into a stage. A black SUV screeched to a stop just feet from the group. Doors slammed, and then Jonathan Kavanaugh stepped into the light. He looked nothing like the polished man who gave speeches at ribbon cuttings. His tuxedo jacket was off, his shirt wrinkled, tie loosened. But the rage in his eyes burned bright. 4 men in dark suits followed, including Wilson, the same man who'd made Diego disappear just days ago. Jonathan's voice was low, controlled, like a man used to being obeyed. "Hand it over." Elijah stood tall, his frame casting a long shadow in the alley light. "Not this time." Jonathan stepped closer, his voice tightening. "That book doesn't belong to you. It's filled with personal notes. Nothing verifiable, nothing legal. It won't hold up." Elijah's face was calm. "Then why are you here?" Jonathan's jaw twitched. Amanda stepped between them. "We've already made copies. The story is scheduled to publish. You're too late." Jonathan laughed once, short and bitter. "You really think a few documents will stop me? You're playing in a world you don't understand. Power doesn't bow to the truth, it buries it." He nodded to Wilson. Wilson raised his hand, revealing a small pistol, silent and black. A weapon not meant to be seen, just used. Amanda stepped back, panic flashing in her eyes. "You're insane!" Jonathan raised a hand, stopping Wilson. "Let me ask you something, Elijah," he said, pacing now, like a man giving one last speech before losing control. "Do you really think anyone in that hotel cares about who owned it first? You're a relic, a footnote. I gave that place a name. I made it matter." Elijah looked at him and spoke softly. "You made it matter by stealing from someone who helped build it." Jonathan's voice rose. "He was weak," he yelled. "My father said it from the start. Carter didn't understand business. He had ideas, sure, but he wasn't made for it. And yet here I am," Elijah replied, lifting the ledger in one hand. "Still standing." Wilson took a step forward again. This time, Amanda moved. She reached into her purse and held up her phone. "We've been recording this entire conversation." A lie, but one she sold with conviction. Jonathan froze. Diego added, "And live streaming. You're already on 3 servers. Keep going. Say one more thing stupid. Let the whole world see who you really are." Jonathan's breath quickened. He looked behind him. 2 of his men shifted nervously. Then, from the street behind them, came the wail of sirens. Not 1, 3. Then another. Bright blue and red lights poured into the alley. The hotel staff had started pouring out the back door too. A few guests followed, holding their phones up, recording, confused but curious. Jonathan's expression twisted. "You think this is over?" "No," Elijah said, stepping forward. "It's just beginning." Wilson aimed the gun one last time, but this time, one of Jonathan's own guards stepped in front of him. "Enough," the man muttered. "This isn't worth it." 2 other guards backed away too. Jonathan's voice cracked now. "Cowards!" But it was too late. FBI agents stormed the alley, flanking both sides. Amanda held her hands up. So did Elijah and Diego. "Over here!" Amanda called. Wilson dropped the gun instantly, raising his hands. Jonathan looked around like a man watching his castle collapse. Special Agent Harrison, the same agent Amanda had contacted days earlier, stepped through the crowd and walked right up to Jonathan. "Jonathan Kavanaugh," she said calmly, "you're under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, fraud, and possibly attempted murder." He didn't resist. He didn't speak. He just stared at Elijah as they handcuffed him, pure hatred in his eyes. Elijah didn't look away. As Jonathan was led to the waiting vehicle, the crowd around the alley grew. More people from the hotel, curious locals, journalists arriving, late, having gotten wind of the chaos. Then someone in the back shouted Elijah's name. "Elijah Carter! Is it true you built the hotel?" A few phones turned his way. More voices followed. Elijah looked at Amanda. She nodded once. It was time. He stepped forward and raised his voice. "My name is Elijah Carter. And yes, this hotel was built on land I owned, with money I invested, with plans I helped draw. For 30 years, I've lived like a ghost while my name was erased. But tonight," he paused, voice steady now, "tonight I stopped being silent." The crowd clapped. Some were confused. Some just watched, but many listened. Amanda walked up beside him, holding the ledger. Diego followed, holding the deed. And just like that, 3 strangers who never should have met stood side by side in front of a broken empire, not as victims, but as witnesses, as truth-tellers. As the lights flashed and the sirens faded, Elijah Carter stood tall in the place that once pushed him into the rain. Only this time, the door was wide open. 3 months later, the Silver Crest didn't look the same. Gone were the portraits of the Kavanaugh family that once lined the lobby. The stiff, cold formality that had ruled the hotel's halls had been replaced with something warmer, quieter, but prouder. Softer music played now. Smiles came easier. Even the air felt lighter. At the front desk, Amanda adjusted the name placard that now sat proudly on the marble counter. Amanda Williams, Director of Community Programs. It still didn't feel real. Just months ago she'd been a receptionist, stuck behind a desk watching the world go by. Now she helped shape that world. She'd stayed on through the whirlwind of court cases, interviews, and transitions. She'd spoken on panels, given statements, answered reporters' questions, and stood beside Elijah when the day finally came, the day the court officially ruled. In his favor, ownership of the hotel, compensation for the stolen property, and damages for wrongful imprisonment, all awarded to Elijah Carter. And when the papers were signed and the court fell silent, Elijah didn't cry. He didn't cheer. He just took a deep breath, the kind a man takes after carrying weight on his shoulders for 30 years, and said, "Let's go home." Now, that home was preparing to reopen under a new banner. Not just a luxury hotel anymore, but a place of memory, of healing, of purpose. A museum wing on the second floor now told the full history of the Silver Crest, with Elijah's name front and center. Framed photos lined the walls. One showed Elijah as a young man shaking hands with Bennett Kavanaugh in 1975. Another showed him in a suit, standing outside the courthouse, holding the original deed in one hand, surrounded by people who had finally believed him. That morning, Elijah stood in the grand ballroom. No tuxedo, no reporters, just him, alone, holding a cup of coffee as sunlight poured in through the tall windows. He wore a simple gray blazer, sleeves slightly too long, his old notebook tucked in his inside pocket. Always. This room had once laughed at him. Now it welcomed him. He walked slowly to the stage, the same stage where Jonathan once gave speeches about his family's legacy, and looked out over the space. Tonight, the hotel would reopen. Not as a shrine to wealth, but as a beacon of second chances. And Elijah? He didn't just get his name back. He'd started something bigger. After the scandal broke, dozens of Black business owners across the city came forward with stories just like his. Properties taken, names erased, voices silenced. And with Amanda's help and Diego's growing voice as a journalist, Elijah launched a legal fund to help those people reclaim what was theirs. He didn't want revenge. He wanted repair. The eye. Door behind him opened softly. Amanda stepped in, smiling. "They're setting up for tonight," she said. "You sure you're ready?" Elijah turned. "I've waited over half my life to be heard. I think I can handle one more evening." Amanda walked up and stood beside him. "There's something else." She handed him a small, neatly folded letter. Handwritten. The paper trembled slightly in Elijah's hands as he unfolded it. The letter was from a woman named Clara, his daughter. She had seen his face in the news. For years, she had believed he was guilty. That shame had shaped her whole life. But when the truth came out, so did her tears. "I was wrong. I'm sorry. I'm proud of you. If you're willing, I'd like to meet you soon." Elijah read the letter twice, then folded it gently, like something fragile. Precious. He didn't say anything right away, but his eyes, they shimmered. Amanda didn't push. She just placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "You earned this," she said. Later that evening, as guests filled the newly opened Silver Crest, Elijah stood by the entrance, not as a stranger, not as a forgotten man, but as its rightful owner. One by one, people came up to shake his hand. Some apologized. Others simply said, "Thank you." The mayor offered to help expand his community programs. A man from the same law firm that once ignored his letters offered to work pro bono for his foundation. A teenager, barely old enough to drive, walked up shyly and said, "My grandma told me about you. She cried when she saw your story. She said to tell you thank you for fighting." Elijah bent slightly, shook the boy's hand, and whispered, "Tell her she never imagined how much that means to me." By the end of the night, Amanda, Diego, and Carl stood at his side as the last guests trickled out. The staff gathered for a quiet toast, not of champagne, but of simple sparkling cider. It wasn't about celebration, it was about truth. "I never thought I'd see this day," Carl said, his voice thick. Elijah looked at each of them. "You believed me when no one else did," he said. "I'll never forget that." The lobby lights dimmed slowly as midnight approached. Elijah lingered for a moment, walking over to the framed deed now hanging on the wall. Below it was a new inscription. "Justice may be delayed, but it cannot be denied. This hotel stands not only on land, but on truth." He reached out and touched the frame, just once, before turning back. As they stepped outside into the quiet night, Amanda looked up at the glowing sign above the entrance. Still the Silver Crest. But now, it meant something. Elijah Carter stood on the sidewalk where he had once been thrown into the rain. Now, the doors behind him stayed wide open, and this time, they were open for everyone.